Primarch broke from cover, pounding across the pebble-strewn hillside with long strides. Surprise would be his first weapon. As the gravel sprayed underfoot, a lone iron warrior, his silver armor dappled with water droplets, turned towards Corax, perhaps somehow hearing the crunching footfalls over the din of the battle. The Primarch acted without hesitation. Stooping in his run, he snatched up a shard of rock. With a flick of his arm, he hurled the stone at the Iron Warrior. As a dark blur, it struck the Space Marine in the throat and erupted from the back of his neck, silently felling him. Corax sprinted onwards, readying his heavy bolter. The thunderstrikes opened up on the Raven Guard, 3 enormous blossoms of fire enveloping the hillside. Corax could not spare a glance for the devastation caused. He was utterly focused on his targets. 50 meters behind the assault guns, he stopped and took up a firing position, bringing the heavy bolter up to his left shoulder, as an ordinary man might heft a rifle. He sighted on the closest thunderstrike, eyes narrowed. He aimed at a point just above the armored maintenance hatch in the vehicle's flank, beyond which sat the primary engine relays. The first roaring salvo of bolts hit the exact mark, ripping through the armor plates. A moment later, smoke billowed from the Thunderstrike's engines before a ball of fire engulfed the assault gun, sending torn pieces of metal flying in all directions. Corax had no time to admire his handiwork. His following fusillade tore into the flexible armor of the next Thunderstrike's gun mounting, smashing gears and jamming the cannon in place. Silver shapes spilled from the rhinos and ran towards Corax, but he ignored them. He primed 3 crack grenades, easily holding all of them in the palm of his hand. With an overhand toss, he lobbed the grenades onto the engine vents of the 3rd Thunderstrike, shattering the grille and rupturing fuel lines. Soon the vehicle was ablaze along the left side of its hull. As the crew emerged smoldering from the hatches, Corax gunned them down with raking fire. Bolter rounds pattered against Corax's armor, nothing more than a distraction. Taking in everything at a glance, the Primarch turned his attention to a Predator tank, slewing in his direction. Its last cannon sponsons swiveled towards him. Twin blasts of energy exploded around the Primarch, hurling him to his back. His chest plastron became a semi-molten slurry. The heavy bolter a mangled ruin in his hand. Pain flared across his chest, but disappeared as quickly as it came. Corax tossed the heavy bolter aside and pulled himself to his feet as the Predator's turret opened fire. Autocannon rounds shrieked past him. He broke into a loping run, shells ringing off his helmet and shoulder pads as he sprinted into the teeth of the metal storm. He cared nothing for the danger, he embraced it. This was what he had been created to do, and joy sang in his veins. Corax's joy was further fueled by a righteousness of purpose. He looked at the Iron Warriors and saw only cowardly bullies revealed in their true nature. The Primarch had been raised fighting such tyrants. To find them within the ranks of the legions appalled him in a way that nothing else ever had. The slave masters of Lycaeus had been human. They had been fallible. The Space Marines had no such excuse. They had been chosen for their strength of body and purpose. They had sworn binding oaths of service to the Emperor and the growing empire of mankind. They were liberators, not oppressors. With a feral roar, Corax leapt upon the Predator. Driven by his indignant rage, he drove his fist through the driver's slit, crushing the skull of the Iron Warrior within. Jumping onto the turret, the Primarch tore away the hatch covers, sending their jagged remains scything through the Iron Warrior squads advancing on him from the transports. The tank's commander looked up in surprise as dim light flooded the interior of the Predator. Corax reached in, his gauntlet enveloping the Space Marine's head. The helmet resisted for a moment before giving in to the titanic pressure. The tank commander's skull collapsed between Corax's fingers. Dropping to the ground, the Primarch grabbed one of the sponson last cannons and braced a foot against the tank's hull. With a heave of his shoulders, Corax tore the mounting free. The gunner within dragged halfway out of the hole. Corax brought his fist down onto the Iron Warrior's back, the force of the blow cracking his armor and shattering his spine. The bolt of fire was becoming too intense to ignore, like a rain shower suddenly turning into a hailstorm. It had grown in vehemence. 4 squads of Iron Warriors poured their fire at the Primarch, legs braced, muzzle flares gleaming from their armor. The Primarch hurled the remains of the Predator's sponson through them, crushing 3 Space Marines. The smoking trail of a missile cut through the air a moment before the projectile crashed into Corax's left shoulder, sending shards of ceramite in all directions and staggering him to one knee. He spat a wordless curse as he surged forwards once more, cutting to the left and right as balls of plasma and rockets screamed around him. Corax covered the 100 meters in a few seconds, coming at the nearest squad from their flank. His fists buckled the faceplates of the first 2 Space Marines. As their bodies slumped, the Primarch snatched up their weapons and stormed into the rest of the squad, a blazing bolter in each hand. The bolts hammered into the Iron Warriors, half a dozen more left on the ground before the ammunition belts were exhausted. Corax tossed the weapons aside. The squad sergeant leapt at him, a screeching chainsword in his right hand, bolt pistol blazing in the left. The Primarch swatted away the whirring teeth of the chainsword and grabbed the sergeant's elbow. With a twist and a wrench, he tore out the Iron Warrior's arm and swung it around, the razor-sharp blades of the chainsword biting deep into the sergeant's helmet. Corax threw the bloody limb aside and grabbed a grenade from the fallen sergeant's belt, slamming his fist into the chest of another Space Marine. The explosive detonated in his grasp. Corax heard the whine of hydraulics to his right as he shook his numbed fingers. A Land Raider opened its assault ramp. Silhouetted against the ruddy light within, a squad of bulky Terminators advanced with purpose. They did not waste the ammunition of their combi bolters, but came forward quickly, flexing lightning-enveloped claws. More detonations and bolter fire rocked the Iron Warriors' column as the Falcons attacked, Aloni's companies descending on the traitors, with jump packs flaring. The Talons pushed forwards from the valley ahead, lascannons and missile launchers cutting trails of death through the surrounded Iron Warriors. The Terminators hesitated in their advance as anarchy reigned around them. Corax reached behind him and pulled a fresh weapon from his belt. A long twin-barbed whip uncoiled in his hands, writhing with a life of its own. The Primarch had requested the Mechanicum of Mars to fashion the lash for him. The irony of wielding such a tyrant's weapon in a noble cause pleased Corax. Inside his helmet, the Primarch grinned in anticipation, flickers of energy sparking along its length. The whip flicked out in Corax's hand and caught the closest Terminator with a thunderous crack, slicing him from shoulder to waist. His remains fell to the ground in 3 pieces, wisps of smoke drifting from the neatly sliced body parts. The Terminators opened fire, but it was too late. Corax's whip slashed the head from another and cut the legs from under a third. Aloni bounded past in his ebon armor, his plasma pistol spitting incandescent blasts. Corax felt a surge of exultation and raised the whip above his head. No mercy.